Hi, everybody. This is the real thing now. Look, I got my stand up. Leslie here, Zazoo Plazz. Look at this thing. Look at that. I figured it out. I put it up. It wasn't that hard to set up. You just screw the little tubes in and then I got one of these things, which I don't know. I might see how that works, but I don't really think I need it. But someday I might. It comes with it, so I'm just gonna leave that up there for now. We'll see how this goes. She's upstairs. She's doing her laundry, stomping all over the place. So we're gonna try this. See how it comes out. I don't have to talk as loud. I can do this. Yeah. Now we're in business. What is it? June 8th, 2026, Zazoo Plazz report. Zazoo Plazz in the house. Yeah. I'm feeling like blues today. Kind of like, 1980. Anyway, he's still up there, but I'm still showing up. I did my Facebook thing, which is, if you haven't been over on my Facebook page, it's The Audacious Adventures of Me. Well, there's a link. Look under, my profile. You'll see a link. It's my only Facebook page, and I shut down my profile a long time ago. So, but it's turning into, I'm developing my craft, and Gemini is the perfect season to do that. And I'm getting to the point where it just flows. Work is play. That's the way God meant it to be. I just sit down and it looks like a big mess. And anybody looking over my shoulder would be like, really? Really? What are you going to do with that? And then, an hour later or however long it takes me. Sometimes it takes me longer depending on how many things I have to cut and paste and finagle, But the writing itself is like quick. That's the easiest part. The part that takes the time is the assembling of everything. Because I do a reel, and I put music with it, and it's a thing. And he's squeaking over my head. But anybody looking over my shoulder would be like, what are you doing? It's a mess. And then if they look at it, when it's all done, they'd be like, wow, how did you do that? But there's madness in my method, so to speak, and that's the topic today. It's it's the body and blood of Christ. It was Thursday, but they celebrated on the Sunday, and I don't do the church thing, but I do the readings. That's how I roll around here, and I make my own, make up my own. To have my own spin on things. Because when I used to go to church, I was too influenced by all the stuff going on around me. And I'm closer to God now. I'm more spiritual now than when I used to go to church. Because there'd be some guy who was scratching and something, and some lady yelling at her kid, some little kid in the front of me, and I'd be watching everybody around me, and I'd be smelling their cologne and getting grossed out, and then the priest would get up there and blah blah blah, and I'd start going to sleep, and and then they had this guy at our church. I talk about this in my Facebook page. Just a little story to start the day. Anyway, it was this guy with when we had this wonderful woman, Mrs. B. She used to run the religious education program, and I taught for 11 or 12 years. Both my boys. The second one, younger one, more than the first one, co-taught. I had, except at the end, and the lady who was teaching with me, the mom, she went back to work, and I was on my own, which was fine. But then, toward the end, when our youngest son was getting ready, we had done 3 years of middle school, with one of the other dads. He came to our house, and the kids would come and sit around. There were 6 of them, and we had we had fun. We did little like quizzes on the phone, and we had fun. We had snack after, and the kids could just come be with their friends and just kind of hang out. We had a group. There was 2 girls and 4 boys, and one of the kids in the group, he kind of dropped out after a confirmation. I don't even know if he made his confirmation. He drifted, but he used to draw like goth pictures and kind of like dark skeletons and stuff on his notes in class. And I noticed it, but he did well on the quizzes. He knew his stuff, but his way was his way. And he and our youngest son ended up going. He's the one who started the band. This kid, great, creative, real smart. He found ways to make money, and he's got all these side businesses going on. So you just don't know. But these kids were all best friends. A couple of the boys in the class, the other dad who taught with me, his son was in Scouts, different Scout troop, but he and our son were best buddies for the longest time. And, so that's kind of like what I'm thinking about today, about friendships, I started thinking about that. So anyway, long story short, of course it's going to be a long story. It's Gemini. La la la. Our parishes were merging, a few years ago. Let's see, when did he make it? 2018 or so, 2018, I think. That fall, they made their confirmation. I know, so it was 2 years before then, when they were like 13. It was like 8th grade, the end of their middle school. They brought this guy in from the other parish. They were merging, and he had one of those handlebar mustaches, kind of like the Wizard of Oz. I didn't trust the guy. I just did. And he didn't think a lot of the moms, mostly moms who were teaching. He didn't want to work with us. He didn't want to listen to what we had to say. He just came in and let that lady go. And after all the years that she taught, and I said, that's dirty. That's way down. I don't like this guy. And then he proceeded to just axe the whole thing. And the kids didn't like it. He didn't care about the kids. He didn't, So, I voiced my concerns. I'm not the kind of person to go, I don't like conflict. But, at the same time, our parish priest they yanked him out. Gen X priest. He was great. The diocese sent him somewhere else, and he left. So it was one of those times. I said, if I'm going to speak my piece now, it's now or never. So it was June. I said, it's June. It's Gemini season in my 9th house, which is the house of spiritual things and higher things. And that's where, my North Node is. So I don't know. Before he was spouting off, and before I knew what I was doing, I was on my feet. Some of the other moms were like, the dads are like, what? They're all waking up. What's going on? They were all sleeping. The kids were running around. So, yeah. And then I left. I said my piece. I got in my damn minivan, and I drove home, and I was like, I got home. My husband was like, what did you do? You look like you're because I was, clenching my teeth and my fists and everything. So it was beeping. So, he probably he wouldn't be the one to get upset. He would get upset if, say, did something at Scouts. Scouts was his passion project. He used to volunteer with Scouts, and I did the religious education thing. Or, he got pretty upset when they were messing with the math program and stuff, the math and science. That was his. So each of us took our, area of expertise to make a stand. And that was my area. God was my area. It was important to me that my boys, had a good foundation, a spiritual foundation. my mom did that for me. That was my mom's job. My dad, he'd go to church and he'd mouth the words, the songs. I knew he was faking it, but he used to do that. Anyway, I knew it. So today, so I got some more stories. Oh yeah, the joke of the day on my Facebook page was uh, when Toad's cars break down, they get towed away. Get it? Towed. I was walking the other night. I had seen little frogs out and about, and the big ones too, the big toads or whatever. And then yesterday I'm walking, there was one flattened out on the road. Somebody must have, just stop squeaking. One of them must have got flattened by some kid coming back, driving fast late at night. Didn't see the poor little frogs. They would sit out in the middle of the road, Poor things. But then, you see it, and it's not good. It's not good. So anyway, that was, would you stop squeaking? Okay. Let's see. Yeah. So, I sent back all the tomato stuff I bought, the pots and the soil and everything. And I just put the little tomato plants outside and they're thriving, I'll have to transfer them to a bigger pot later. But it seems that, it likes it outside, and it rains a lot lately. So they're getting watered. Hopefully I'm still talking here. Okay, so there was that. I dealt with it. I felt better, Anyway, squeak, squeak, squeak. Yeah. So, and then I gotta say something about, I just can't. I do a lot of searching, and I Googling, but lately it seems you get all these, summaries, and it's like the Cliff Notes. It's like the stupid kid in class who uses Cliff Notes. I don't need that. I can summarize myself, and I can, and then you gotta scroll past all that crap, which is just like bleh. Just it gets in my way. It doesn't help me. It gets in my way. It's redundant, and I gotta say, it's more of an annoyance than anything. So I put minus AI, and I get the websites, because I don't take anything from there. I just don't. It's more of an annoyance. It doesn't scare me. It's like the dumb kid in class who copies off your paper, and who's asked to write something, and they write, "This is a book report, and this is what the book report is about." It's that kid. That's what AI is. It's no big breakthrough. It's people spending a lot of money on something that's unnecessary. Anyway, that's all I have to say about that. Okay, Zazoo, settle down, Sally. What do you really think? That's what I really think. Sometimes I gotta spout off, or else I'm gonna explode. Anyway, this is so cool. Anyway, I'll get to the Bible. All right. Yeah. So today was Joan Rivers' birthday. Now this is interesting. She passed away a few years ago. A few years ago? When did she die? Recently, fairly recently. Couple years ago. But the interesting, not interesting, but sad that she was having just a routine kind of procedure done, and then something went really wrong, and they had to transfer her to Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City. So what I noticed, and it made me think, I was born, so that was I guess it was a Jewish hospital because she was Jewish. But my mother had me at Mount Sinai. We're Catholic, but she went to Mount Sinai Hospital in Hartford, and it was on Blue Hills Ave. That's where her doctor was. And this was 1965. So apparently, I was thinking the other day, how come I was born in a Jewish hospital? So what happened was, in 1923, the one in Hartford was founded for Jewish doctors because they wouldn't let them practice at the Christian Catholic hospitals, So they went and started their own. So that's great. So in 1990, they became affiliated with St. Francis Hospital, which is the Catholic hospital. And then in 95, they merged. So it was the first Jewish Catholic collaboration of a hospital in the U.S., which I never knew. And now it's a rehab facility. I think I might have talked about this last week, but it's interesting because Moses and Mount Sinai and that whole thing. That's where we got the 10 Commandments and all that stuff. Talking up on the mountain. And I'm a mountain type in human design, so I thought that was kind of interesting. So Deuteronomy 8. So it's the manna reading. It's about, apparently they weren't being grateful enough, the Israelites in the desert. And Moses is like, if you're talking about friendships, right? You know how you can take friends for granted sometimes. Even the best friends can take each other for granted, kind of like forget all the good things you've done for each other, even though if you're friends with somebody over a long time, there's tough times and there are good times. They're the ones who come to your relatives' funerals and, bring a casserole when you, or send flowers and come over with presents, when you have your kids. They're there celebrating at your birthdays. The true friends, right? They're the ones, they've seen you at your worst and your best, right? They were at your wedding, they're your kids' godparents, Those are the ones, that they know you. They knew you when, and they know you, and for better or worse. And sometimes you drift apart, because it just, whether you don't need them anymore or they kind of drift away from you, it happens. People go live different places, whatever, But, I've had some friends for a long time, and, it hurts when you don't see them and you can't see them anymore because you just don't think the same way anymore. You don't feel the same way, It's boring. It's repetitive. It hurts. They broke your trust. They did something and threw you under the bus. They betrayed you somehow, right? And you just don't have it in you to be friends anymore. All those things have happened, but you don't, you try to hold on to the good things, right? Honor what they did for you in your life, right? Don't focus on all the things that went wrong. Focus on that God brought you this friend when you needed it, right? That's how I like to look at it. And then he'll take them away when you don't need them anymore, right? Somehow. So it's a thing. So this is kind of like, it's a metaphor for, how God was there for them. He said, remember those 40 years when, God put you through these tests, right? He let you be hungry in the desert. So you appreciate, when he gave you manna, he gave the white flakes. This, God, because God wants to see how well they kept the commandments. In other words, how good is our relationship? He's monitoring. You have to do that. Is this person, still doing it for me? Is this person still my kind of people? And that's what God was doing. Are these people, is this one-sided? Am I just giving them stuff and then they're complaining, and they're going off and doing stuff and betraying me? They're not being true, right? So, he says, don't forget that God's brought you through all the scorpions and the serpents and the thirst and the rock and hard place and all that stuff. And he did those things for you, right? So all those are reasons to stick with him. God's not gonna let us go. We let him go, by not reciprocating. There's always something to be thankful for, right? But how often do we just go around and say, complain, right? And lose faith because we think that God's not there for us, right? Or the universe or whoever. So, it says the Psalms, praise the Lord, Jerusalem, right? And it talks about gates and borders. God focused his attention on his people, right? Instead of, we don't hear about in the Old Testament about him going here and there and this people and that people. In the Old Testament, he focused on that one group of people, right? To show how faithful he was, right? They were his best friends, his chosen, right? He gave them all his good stuff, his blessings, his knowledge, right? All that. And he talks about gates and borders. In other words, when you have a best friend, it's like, you're not, you do put up kind of a border, right? To keep out those people. Because when you're in a crowd, you kind of, blend in the crowd. You'll do things, right? Just anything to get accepted. But when you find, a true friend, it's like, you tell them things that you wouldn't tell anybody else. You can be yourself, right? With that one friend. For me, like when you're married, for me, my ex and I, we, for the years we were married, I considered him my best friend because when you're married, it's best to be friends with your spouse, right? And at its best, it's a friendship, with benefits. But you gotta be friends because that's the person I would go and tell him everything. As much as we never give all of ourselves away to anybody. There's still some of us that only God knows, whether we can't express it or we just don't, right? And that's human. You've got to keep a little bit of yourself to yourself, for yourself, right? And my problem sometimes, I would give too much, and then I wouldn't have enough, So now, instead of putting people on pedestals and expecting them to save me, I save myself. I talk to myself. I'm good company. Anyway, yeah. So anyway, so that's how God kind of operates. So then they talk about the whole metaphor of bread and wine, right? Paul to the Corinthians 1. He said, the cup is our participation in Christ's blood, and the bread is his body, right? So there's this idea of the one body eating the one bread and the one cup, drinking the one cup. Everybody, all these different parts of the body, right? But eating the one thing, right? That nourishes everybody in different ways, right? When you eat and you drink, there's my fridge. It goes here, it goes there, some of it goes here, and some of it goes out there. You know what I mean. The stuff you don't need, but it nourishes the body in different ways, right? So that's what that metaphor is kind of saying. But the bread is it's a metaphor for spirit, the spirit, Christ spirit that we all partake of, right? So John chapter 6, Jesus he's talking to his Jewish crowds, people, and he's telling them he's the living bread, come down from heaven, and whoever eats it will live forever. And he's flesh for the life of the world. And people are going, what? He wants us to eat him? What are we, cannibals? What's this guy talking about? What you talking about, Jesus? Anyway, So, he's saying in the old days, that their ancestors, they knew this because they read the scriptures. They knew about the manna in the desert and all that. And he's the new manna, new manna in the block, whatever. He's saying God sent him, and he's fed by God, and we're fed by him, right? So there's this sort of a nourishment, a channel of nourishment, but it's it's metaphorical, right? In other words, if we're doing what God means us to do, that will nourish us in a way that we won't. It'll last forever. It won't be one of these things where you eat some fast food and then you're hungry. You have Chinese, and in 2 hours you Chinese food. You have some egg rolls and some chop suey, and 2 hours later you're hungry again, right? So it's not like that. It's So anyway, you know what I'm talking about. I got my cashew butter, so this week I can have my snack, my Paleo hot chocolate and my cashew butter rice cake. Looking forward to that. I'm really hungry. Then I gotta put in my grocery order and figure out. Do the song. Okay. All right. Now, it's also Buzz Gagg's birthday. I don't know how old he is. He's 70s, I think. I don't know. Something. But I found this song in the 70s, early 80s, when I was kind of going into high school. He was really popular. So this song called Breakdown, Dead Ahead. So the idea of it, was released March of 1980. So I was a freshman in high school. And by May, it went up to it got to number 15 on the Billboard 100. So the idea of it was the lead single of 2 songs from his Middleman album. So, he talks about this concept in this song about God testing us, but, to be grateful. And in other words, in the song, some of the lyrics are about, I won't let you down. I won't, maybe I might, test you a little bit, might pull your strings and, maybe get on your nerves a little bit, but I'm not going to leave you, right? In other words, there's the testing. It's a testing. And I think the video has something to do with trucks. He's jumping in and out of trucks, and that's kind of appropriate. Thinking about the highway, breaking down on the highway, and you get the tow truck that comes out. That happened to me with my minivan a few years ago. I was going to pick up my kid at UConn, and my minivan just died right on Route 195. All the parents are going spring break, picking up their kids, and my minivan dies at the red light. It just, I don't know. I couldn't start it, and all these people are behind me. And a few good people came by and they helped me push my car, onto the side road. And to come to find out, there was a garage, not even a minute down the road. So the tow truck came, towed me. I didn't even have AAA at that time. I don't know how I did it. I have it now. But, the guy came, put my minivan on the tow truck, drove it down. Then I got a ride with my kid's friend. He had a friend who had his mom had a really nice, black SUV. There's all these Gen Z kids. I'm like, why did you have me even pick you up? Because, he threw all his stuff in the back. And I said, okay, that's what I'm talking about. This is the kind of person I am. I'm barreling up there, go pick up my kid. And meanwhile, he could have had a ride the whole time. Anyway, but that's what we do, we parents. That's what we do. So yeah, so that's right a half an hour. Um, yeah, I guess that's all I have to say for today. I'll be back next week, same place, different time. She'll probably still be stomping on my head because that's the way it goes, you know. So, um, so hopefully you can hear me this time. We're getting there. So, take care and take care, friends. Have a good week, and yeah, go out there and be good to each other. Be kind. Talk to you next time. Take care. Bye bye.